All right. Good afternoon, everybody. We welcome you. Welcome to Time to Tell the Truth series. It's a series that we've put together because I've been commissioned by God to do just this content and put this content out there and put in the work and the research and everything for people to get information because we are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. Who am I? My name is Dr. Roslyn Shaw Belt. For those of you that don't know me, everybody calls me Dr. Roz. I am the CEO of Dream to Life Productions Ministry. We try to do so many things to help bring their dreams to life, whomever that may be that we come in contact with, expose them, inform them. I am a wife, a loving husband, Adrian Belt. I'm a musician, a lot of things that I've been blessed to be able to do during my short lifetime. I do have two doctorates. I'm not a medical doctor, so let me go on record in stating that up front. But I am a certified wellness coach with Akana. Yes, I've got two certifications. One is that I'm a certified Akanapreneur and lifestyle consultant. And secondly, I've gone through the process and the procedure and the training by our naturopathic doctor, Dr. Eric Prince, to become a certified wellness coach. And that is the launching pad that I use to share the information. Today's topic is the end of dementia. It's time for it to end. We're going to put an end to dementia. How are we going to put an end to dementia? Through knowledge and education to even a younger generation. Because as we recognize, there are those who are dealing with it, and we understand that science has told us that it's not reversible when people get in certain stages of it. But I believe that if we can start earlier in educating people how people who have maybe gone on got there, then we can put a stop to it. That's what it's all about the end of dementia. Because dementia is not, and you see it's in red letters, it is not a natural part of aging. I'm going to pause right there because I need you to get that. It is not a natural part of aging. So if you're listening to the sound of my voice and you've hit 50 and 60 and 70 and you're in your 80s and you have been told, or because everybody else has experienced it in your family, that it must take place, I came today to tell you that's a lie. Dementia is a set of symptoms that develop when the brain is damaged by disease. So any kind of disease, we can stop, we can reverse. And there are many things that can increase a person's chances of developing dementia, and these are known as risk factors. So what does that tell me? I need to know what the risk factors are. We're going to share some information, and you're going to hear me repeat some things over and over, because my goal in this session is to make sure that next time you go to the grocery store, next time you go and use certain products and things, you will have a second thought before you do it regularly. Now, ethnicity, a lot of studies have suggested that people from Black, African, Black, Caribbean, and South Asian ethnic groups are more likely to get dementia than people from the white ethnic groups. Now, we know that dementia, Alzheimer's is something that takes place in every race, so there's no particular race that is void of it. But we understand that we have certain cultures that are more prone to it. And this includes a recent study of people living in London, which also found that people from Black ethnic groups have the highest level of risk. So you understand why it concerns me. One possible reason for these differences is that people from Black African, Black Caribbean, and South Asian ethnic groups in the UK are more likely to develop diabetes and cardiovascular disease as they get older. Both diabetes and cardiovascular disease, heart disease, are important risk factors for dementia. Now, let's think about that. Think about all the people that you know that are experiencing or have experienced dementia and they've progressed into certain stages of it, or maybe they died of it. Think about it. Did they have a problem with diabetes? Did they also, or maybe have a problem with heart disease or cardiovascular disease? So when we look at the statistics, Comes from Columbia University Irving Medical Center. We see 15% of Black African Americans have experienced dementia, and then some of them mild cognitive impairments, 22%. But we're at the top of the percentage level as it comes to certain different things. Now, notice on the mild side, we even see people that are less than high school age that are experiencing mild cognitive impairment. So the one thing we've got to understand, nothing happens overnight, everything happens over time. So one of the first things, and hear me when I say this, and I'm gonna say this again, in case you're just jumping in, you're gonna hear some repetitive stuff today. Because I want to drive it down in your throat, drive it in your brain so that you recognize what you as an individual can start doing to lower the risk of you or anybody that you know having dementia. Daily consumption of sodas, fruit juices, and artificially sweetened sodas affect the brain. Check this out. And let me make sure I got this, because I don't remember. I did click it. Okay.
So we performed a series of studies to look at the association between beverage intake and brain health. So in the first study, we looked at the association between different aspects of beverage intake and brain volume using brain imaging and cognitive performance such as thinking and memory function. And we found that higher consumption of both sugary beverages and diet sodas was associated with smaller brain volumes. In a second study, we looked at beverage intake and the risk of developing stroke and the risk of developing dementia in the future. We found that higher intake of diet sodas was associated with an increased risk of both stroke and dementia. So we know that sugary beverages are associated with poorer health outcomes, but in our study we also found that those who more frequently consumed diet sodas also had an increased risk of adverse brain outcomes, including a higher risk of stroke and a higher risk of developing dementia. So diet sodas might not necessarily be a healthy alternative to sugar-sweetened beverages. It's important to realise that our study cannot draw cause and effect between beverage intake and the risk of stroke or the risk of dementia. However, we advise that people are cautious about the intake of diet sodas, and we're calling for more research to better investigate the associations between diet soda and health outcomes.
Guys, I'm not waiting on the research, okay? People say, well, I don't believe this because they haven't done enough research. Well, to me, I'm going to say it again. How many people have to die while the research is being done? How many people have to lose their cognition? I'm challenging you to think about it the next time you're reaching and grabbing a soda. And here's the thing that he said. You think, okay, I'll drink diet. Listen, guys, let's look at the difference. Regular sodas, the ingredients, sugar, high fructose syrup. So we already know we shouldn't be drinking a can of Coke every day. We shouldn't be drinking 2 and 3 times a day. My soda of choice was the red soda, Big Red. I loved Big Red. And then I would drink Coke and I would drink Dr. Peppers. And every time we get on the highway, that was the one time I'm going to grab that soda because the water would send me to the bathroom. But then we came in a period of our lives where we said, okay, I'm going to get off sodas, but I'm going to go with diet sodas, diet Coke, diet Dr. Pepper, diet Mountain Dew, diet Pepsi. I mean, we got to understand we got to understand that we look at those ingredients and we understand that all of a sudden now we're doing diet, but guess what? It's just as bad. Because now the diet soda contains what? Artificial sweeteners like aspartame and isosulfoname. I mean, stuff that's even difficult to pronounce. Let me tell you guys, when it's hard to pronounce it, something's wrong with it. Like the medication, you can't pronounce it, something's wrong with it. Look at the calories. Regular soda, 125 to 180 calories per 12-ounce can. You can't even find a 12-ounce can these days. Everything is 16, 20 ounce. They put them on special, even 1 liter. They're getting larger and larger. I went to a store and there was a 12-ounce can way at the top of the shelf, and it's not with every particular brand, just a few of them. The diet typically has very few or no calories. Nutrition, added vitamins and minerals in the sodas, little or no nutritional value in the diet sodas. The health effects, regular soda is considered unhealthy due to its high sugar content. We know that, we recognize that. Many of us have come to that, but there are still people that you know, people that are still in your family. And I'm not saying you're going to be able to don't go and attack them and say, get that Coke can out your hand. But get the information in their hand and let them begin to make decisions. I'm excited when a person stops drinking one every day to drinking one every other day, because that's progress. Even with the diet soda, so many people think they're doing a good thing, but the artificial sweeteners have been linked to health issues like weight gain and increased risk of type 2 diabetes. And however, some say that added sugar, even when it's real, is also bad for your health. And we want the fizz, right? Fizziness. So your regular sodas don't have much fizz. Why? Because the sugar covers it up. But the diet sodas tend to be fizzier because the sweeteners in the diet sodas make it easier for carbon dioxide bubbles to form. And then the flavor. That's what we look for, the flavor. And even when we drink diet, we want that diet not to taste like it's diet. But it usually has a sharper taste and sometimes that little artificial aftertaste because of the sweeteners. So it tends to taste a little sweeter than regular sodas, but the sweetness might feel less natural or slightly metallic. So there's been some research, and if we're waiting for more research, then we're waiting too long. So let's get busy and start recognizing this is one particular area that we can start making a difference. We can exercise the brain. This is how we're going to end dementia. You getting this knowledge, you passing this knowledge on to another generation and another generation, because every person that has had dementia or that is experiencing Alzheimer's or is in the hospital today or has died from it, it started 30 years before it happened. It started 40 and 50 years before it happened. So activity, any activity, guys, that involves thinking and learning. I had a 90-year-old woman on her birthday, and she was doing crossword puzzles with ink. See, still using her brain. Any kind of activity, thinking and learning can improve your brain health and help protect against dementia. Evidence suggests that greater benefit comes from more complex and challenging mental activities. There's no reason why we can't keep the brain active. Some of you ought to start playing some of the video games on your phone and some of the crossword puzzles and go and buy some of the old puzzles that we used to put together. There are even apps with puzzles that you can do. The more brain activities you do, the more frequently you do them, and the more complex the activity, the lower the risk of dementia is likely to be. Enjoy hobbies like painting and woodwork. I mean, sometimes we get to a certain age and we stop doing. We stop being busy. We stop being active. Do a short course, do a jigsaw, crossword, a number of word puzzles. Dance, play an instrument, speak a new language. Go to the theater, go to the movies, go to the museum, go to the gallery, go to a concert, and stay socially engaged. This is how we're going to end dementia. Not living in a world all by yourself, dancing, enjoying it with others, getting some great exercise, and use your brain and your body to learn a new move. Let me tell you something, line dancing is thebomb.com, no matter what age you are. And don't say it's too hard to do it. Just get out there and try. Get out there and try to figure it out. Traveling, going new places, enjoying things with others, and involving a lot of walking or other physical activities. Do what you can to get involved. Volunteering. Be a part of social groups and local groups and fraternal and sorority groups or favorite charity groups. Walking with friends or family, joining a club, even book clubs online, organizing game nights with your friends, taking dancing or singing lessons, and catching up with your friends and talking to your neighbors. Now let's talk about some food, the best foods for preventing dementia. Did you hear me say preventing? I want you to put into the chat right now. I don't have to have it. Come on, I need everybody on the same page with me today. I don't have to have it. Drop it in the chat, drop it in the chat. So let's look at the kind of foods that we can use and start making a part of our diet to prevent dementia. Colorful foods, colorful fruits and vegetables. That's all that's associated. Colors, 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 colors. Carrots and squash and sweet potatoes and bell peppers and tomatoes and papaya and apricots and leafy greens and spinach and kale. I need that in your refrigerator. I need that in your house. Am I saying you can never, ever, ever have any of the other things that you want? I didn't say that. You heard me say at the very beginning, it's what you do regularly. Some of us eat the wrong foods every single day, every single week. Berries, we need berries. We need berries. Great source of antioxidants and flavonoids. That's why I'm so glad our company has the aronia berry. Listen, foods such as blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, all have nutritional punch. Plus, they have the added benefit of being naturally lower in sugar than many other fruits. Number 3, fish, seafood. We gotta have high, or it's definitely higher than we have, omega-3 fatty acids. And the omega-3 fatty acids is especially helpful in this regard, but our bodies cannot produce it on its own, so we have to rely on our diet. Experts say we need 2 to 3 servings of fish a week. Fish, we're talking about your tuna, your salmon, the fish. Come on now, you've got to put this, I need it in your freezer, I need it in your refrigerator. Number 4, nuts and seeds and legumes. We've got to have these things in our diet at some point. We're talking about we got to have some walnuts and some peanuts and some soybeans and some lentils, flaxseed, pumpkin. Find something that you like. Pray and ask God to make your taste buds like it. Whole grains, they're rich in fiber B vitamins. Other nutrients can reduce inflammation in the brain. You're going to learn a lot more today about this inflammation that's leading us to dementia, because whole grains will support the memory and ward off dementia. We're going to put an end to dementia. Whole grains such as quinoa and barley and brown rice and oats are great choices that can be healthier alternatives to more processed grains such as white flour. Now let's talk about the worst foods. And I need you to think about this. I need you to think about how often you have these foods in your diet, in your daily regimen. Sodas, pastries, fried foods, some baked goods, bacon. Don't shoot the messenger. Sausages, frozen meals, and other highly processed foods. Did you see this? This is a guy, he's a dietitian, Luke Corey. He said the worst foods to eat are those that are high in calories, low in nutrients, such as essential vitamins and minerals. And that was the list that he put together. And many of these foods are high in sodium and added sugar. Here's what he says we should do. Check the food labels. Don't just get it off the shelf just because you've been eating it all your life. Over a period of time, time is not our friend when it comes to disease. Because once you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again for 10, 15, 20, 30 years, you're progressively leading to the place that we don't want to be, and we're getting ready to end dementia. So sodium comes from salt. Most of our sodium consumption is from packaged foods. That's how it stays on the shelf. That's how they keep it in the counter. And the meals at the restaurant. So read the label. The saturated fats are found in the higher amounts in animal-based foods, even like butter, cheese, whole milk, and fatty meats, like sausages. I know we love our ribs. Did I say you can't have a rib for the 4th of July? I didn't say that. I'm talking about what we regularly do. Some of us barbecue all the time and don't even realize that the charcoal gets into the meat, and that charcoal that's in the meat gets into our digestive tract, and into our digestive tract, now it leads to through our bloodstream, causing plaque buildup. So we got to opt out. We've got to be more intentional when we're walking through the grocery store, when we're walking in a restaurant, when we're with the family and friends. So the top foods to avoid, according to Alison Gottfried, a certified nutritionist, you should avoid anything that's highly processed. And if you're not sure, read the label. If it's got more than 3 items, so if it's got items on the back of that label that you can't pronounce, it's being processed. Now, Corey noted, he said, I would never say you can't eat a certain food, but rather I would say only consume the following items on rare occasions. Look at the 3 worst foods he said we should rarely eat, if not at all. Some of you may leave here, you may cut it out. And others of you may say, okay, I'm gonna cut it down. I'm gonna minimize it. Frozen pizza, regular soda, and processed meats. And I know we've been raised with it. We've been raised on it. I mean, we make some changes, but we don't make the necessary changes. We've been raised on eating our breakfast with bacon and sausages and, Jimmy Dean. Love some Jimmy Dean, right? Love all the bacon, and you want the thick pieces. You don't want the little thin pieces of bacon. But nobody tells us what's in the bacon, the nitrates that are banned in other countries. Godfrey said the 3 worst foods are the highly processed daily meats. There it is again. If you go to the Cancer Society's website, nitrates and nitrites are listed as carcinogenic. So doesn't that make sense to why so many people are dying of cancer? And now dementia is just going rampant. Everybody in everybody's family's got somebody being attacked by it. Sugary coffee drinks, sugary cereals. And we think we're doing a good thing to go get all the beautiful, colorful cereals for our kids. Let me say it again. Those colors, the red and the yellow colors are banned in other countries, except the United States. So the foods that we should eat every day: apples, grapefruit, bananas, papaya, broccoli, sweet potatoes, beets, spinach, peppers, fruits, and vegetables. They must be on your plate. You got to get them on your plate. Even while you wean yourself from other things, please, I'm begging you, put some color on your plate. Add some superfoods like Swiss chard and kale and spinach and collard greens. Those things are rich in folate, zinc, calcium, iron, magnesium, vitamin C, and fiber. So it seems obvious, yet few people meet the minimum USDA recommendation for the daily intake of greens. I mean, that's a part of our system, and we still don't follow it. So they are easy to add to any salad or side dish. Just add it, put the salad, eat a salad for every meal, every other meal. Change your lifestyle. Leafy greens are a solid source of calcium, especially for those looking for dairy-free options. Everything I've said so far, and I'm going to give some proof to back it up because, as I said, I'm a wellness coach, not a medical doctor, but I want you to hear from a medical doctor's viewpoint in just a few minutes. But everything I've said thus far does not cost a lot of money. You just got to make some necessary choices: berries and spices and salmon, chia seeds, green tea. Here's another nutritionist named Nancy Clark. She's a member of the American College of Sports Medicine. There is not a good food or a bad food, she said. Rather, there is a balanced diet and an unbalanced diet. She says, for example, an apple counts as a good food, but a diet of only apples is a bad, unbalanced diet. So you can overdo anything. So she says oftentimes like cakes, labeled as bad. But something like a birthday cake should be enjoyed with your friends and families, and it can be included as part of an overall balanced diet for the day and week. No, and I love what she said here. No single food in isolation is going to make a person fat or ruin their health. What matters more is how individual foods fit into your overall pattern of eating. It's not what you do some of the time, it's what you do most of the time. And most of the people that have experienced dementia have a bad pattern of eating. So many factors are in play when we eat every day. Many healthy patterns for eating are possible. The important thing is for each person to find a pattern that works for them. So I'm not saying, I agree with Corey in the last line here. She says, I would never say you can't eat a certain food. I would say only consume the following items on rare occasions. So you don't kick yourself because you had a birthday party and you ate a piece of birthday cake on that day. But when you're eating cake and you're eating pastries and you're stopping at the donut shop every single morning, that's what I'm talking about.
You were so bold as to write a book called The End of Alzheimer's. So what is it that you know that everybody else doesn't?
Yeah, and I should say, that cognitive optimization now goes very well with prevention of Alzheimer's in the future. So what we used to think of as, hey, you don't have to worry about this until you're in your 60s, no, we should be doing in our teens, 20s, 30s, 40s. We will get better outcomes. We will get better brain health. We'll get better performance. So the goal of my laboratory over the years was to look at what are the molecular mechanisms that drive the degenerative state. People say Alzheimer's is because of free radicals. It's because of metal binding problems. It's because of misfolded proteins. It's because of prions. It's because, what have you. And the reality is that people don't understand what it is. So that's what we set out to look at 30 years ago. And what we found was really surprising. What we found is that at the heart of Alzheimer's is an insufficiency. You literally have a plasticity network in your brain that responds. And again, this is not surprising. If you think about what it takes to make a country work or to make your business work, you have a supply, you have a demand. So what happens in Alzheimer's, you have a chronic mismatch between the demand and the supply. And there are four big things that affect those. Number one, anything that drives ongoing inflammation, and that can be dentition, so changes in your oral microbiome, changes in your sinus microbiome, gut microbiome, systemic inflammation, metabolic syndrome, P. gingivalis, herpes simplex 1, on and on and on. Anything that drives inflammation. Anything that adds toxicity to your brain. And unfortunately, as you know, we are all exposed to toxins like never before, from the California fires to the air pollution that we live with, to the processed foods that we are exposed to, on and on and on, to the water supply, and on and on and on. So those are two of the big ones. The third one is trophic support. So this was actually discovered years ago by Rita Levi-Montalcini, who won the Nobel Prize for her work. She discovered the first one, which she called the nerve growth factor. These are typically proteins that bind to specific receptors in your brain and essentially say things are good. So what happens with Alzheimer's is you have this set of things that are suboptimal. And as I said, that can be inflammatory things, it could be toxic things, can be reduced growth factor and trophic support, including nutrients and hormones, and then energetics. And that's a misunderstood one. Many people, here's a simple example of many, you go to sleep at night, you drop your oxygenation. For many people, they don't realize this is happening sometimes in their 20s, 30s, 40s. Now you can check this easily. Check it with your Apple Watch. Check it, with a bed or whatever you like, or get a sleep study. You should be sitting at 96 to 98% oxygen saturation.
What drops people's levels? So when I started researching you, I literally immediately I paused my research and went and bought 2 oximeters, one for myself and one for my wife. And then I started thinking, well, wait a second, what would cause my oxygen levels to drop? Would it be just sleep apnea, or are there other things?
Yeah, the most common is sleep apnea. And by the way, that happens more in males, more as we get a little older, more as we are a little overweight, which again, a big problem in our country and in the Western world, more as we have inflammation. So systemic inflammation associated with sleep apnea. A lot of people will actually improve their sleep apnea just as they improve their inflammatory status. But there are also other conditions. There's one, for example, something called UARS, upper airway resistance syndrome, where you don't actually have apneic episodes, but you are essentially struggling to get enough air through there while you're sleeping. So it's a resistance syndrome. And because of that, you're now repeatedly making a little bit of adrenaline. Boom. So you're waking up again and again and again. So again, good to know that you're sleeping, that you're getting enough REM sleep, you're getting enough slow wave sleep, you're getting enough deep sleep, and you're getting enough overall sleep. These are all critical features. Again, these are things that we take for granted, and unfortunately, so many of us are literally giving ourselves cognitive decline or simply suboptimal cognition because we are not doing the right thing.
So I'm gonna put a mile marker for people. And as soon as I heard you say it, I thought, oh my God, of course this is the answer. That it's diet, it's lifestyle, it's exposure to toxins. It's like a whole bunch of things. I've heard you say before, there's no silver bullet, but there's potentially silver buckshot. That if we deal with all of these different assaults on the brain that are causing the insults, the injuries, then you're not going to have the cognitive decline.
So we're not going to have it. We're going to put an end to it. See, at least 1 in 20 people with dementia developed the condition when they were aged under 65. See, I think we sometimes don't think about when did it happen? When did it start? All we see is the results of a person losing their memory, losing their cognitive abilities. And we're not realizing that that started 30, 40 years ago with things that were taking place. And he gave a list of things as it relates to our diet, the toxins that we breathe, the way that we sleep. So it didn't happen overnight. So I'm challenging you to believe and to share with everybody that we can put an end to dementia. He talked about insufficiencies. He talked about inflammation. We did a whole session on inflammation, and you should go back to our YouTube page and get that whole teaching on inflammation. All of these things are causing inflammation. I said I'm going to repeat myself. I'm doing it on purpose. Sodas, energy drinks, white bread, pasta, pastries, fast food, fried food, cookies, check crackers, bacon, sausage, hot dogs, red meats, excessive alcohol, corn, soybean, sunflower oil, artificial sweeteners, stress, lack of exercise, poor sleep patterns, obesity. Why am I repeating myself? Because I want you to hear this going over and over in your head when you're walking through the grocery store. Toxicity, air pollution, water contamination, pesticides, herbicides, cleaning products, deodorants, lotions. We're going to do a whole session on all these things that are toxic that we sometimes use on a daily basis, not realizing we've never looked at our toothpaste to see what's in it. And we use it every day. We've never looked at our deodorant to see what's in it. And we use it every day. Old paint, lead from old paint, pipes or soil, nicotine, tar, heavy metals from smoking and vaping, BPA from plastics that we're using, and food packaging. And then tropic support. Anything that helps your body align with its natural sleep rhythms and improve sleep quality. Okay, so let me ask, how well are you sleeping? How well do you sleep at night? Are you going through the 4 stages of sleep? The NREM, that's the light sleep. That's where the body starts to relax and the brain activity slows down. Helps to regulate your sleep cycle and makes up the largest percentage of your total sleeping time. It's essential for processing thoughts and balancing metabolism. If you skip the light sleep, it can make it harder to transition into the deeper sleep stages. Many of us have sleep apnea and we do not sleep well and don't recognize it. It's related to our diet. We wake up all the time, all throughout the night. That's why I'm so glad I got introduced to CBD, and I can take a CBD gummy to give me that REM sleep. REM is that rapid eye movement sleep. That's where the dreams occur. Typically, it happens about 90 minutes after you fall asleep. It has the rapid eye movements. It has the increased brain activity. It has the temporary muscle paralysis. It's essential for cognitive functions like memory consolidation, problem solving. Have you ever gone to sleep and woke up and all of a sudden you got the problem solved? All of a sudden you know where something is? All of a sudden now you've got an answer to what you went to sleep with not having an answer? That lack of that REM sleep can lead to memory issues, mood swings. Some of you got a bad attitude when you wake up because you didn't sleep good at night. Difficulty concentrating and emotional instability linked to anxiety and depression. Then there's that deep sleep. And you can go to sleep early at night and still never experiencing a good sleep. Deep sleep occurs during the third stage of the non-REM sleep, the most restorative stage, where the body begins to repair. God made our body to repair itself, regenerate its tissues, to build the bone and muscle, and strengthens the immune system, crucial for physical recovery, energy restoration, and the maintenance of vital bodily functions like hormone regulation and cell repair. When you're not getting a deep sleep, it leads to physical fatigue, weakened immunity, and long-term health issues like heart disease and diabetes. And then the overall sleep. That's the uninterrupted sleep. That refers to the quality of your overall sleep, not interrupted by frequent awakenings or disturbances, critical for moving through all the sleep stages properly. And this ensures that the body and the brain can move through the sleep cycles seamlessly. The key for restoring energy and optimizing physical and mental health. When we don't get overall sleep, you're constantly waking up, disrupting the sleep cycles. It leads to poor quality of rest, can cause chronic fatigue, irritability, and cognitive impairment.
So can you walk us through like just the basic things that people encounter on a daily basis? So you threw out processed food already, but things like mold, and you talked about air pollution. Like, what are some of the just everyday insults people are taking?
Yeah, so let me just quickly walk through what this disease actually is, because that's the whole, that's the whole point of this. That when you're stuck back in the idea that the amyloid is causing the disease itself, it makes no fundamental sense. Then you say, well, wait a minute, amyloid turned out to be an antimicrobial peptide. So, no surprise, it is part of your defense. So again, your brain is deciding, are things good and I'm going to grow and maintain synapses, or am I under assault from any of these various things that we'll talk about? And therefore, I have to go into protection mode. I'm going to pull back and say, okay, I won't have quite as many synapses, but I'll survive. And that's what's happening as we get a little older. We begin before, 20 years before Alzheimer's, we begin to downsize, unfortunately.
Let's get into the mechanism of that really fast. So
Yes.
I like that. It's very clear. And I know hippocampal density is one of the things you look at to judge whether somebody is having this problem or not. So what's going on is the brain is permanently staying in the mode of protect, downsize.
Right.
And even in old age, should it be alternating between protect and grow?
Yes, you should. Yeah, you should be able, as long as you don't have a lot of inflammation, a lot of toxicity, you got the support from trophic factors, hormones and nutrients, and you've got support for energetics, your brain should be able to make and maintain synapses. That's why when people say, oh, this person's 95 years old, but she's sharp as a tack, or he's sharp as a tack. You see this all the time, and this is because they've got that appropriate balance. And
Okay, so as they're shrinking,
Yes.
obviously if you don't remove the insult, the injury, and you said that trying to treat the symptoms of Alzheimer's would be like trying to repair your house as it's on fire, and it doesn't make sense. That conjured such a powerful image, but why does it keep shrinking and shrinking and shrinking?
Right. So when we said this about the house on fire for stem cells, so the idea was if you're only giving a monotherapy, so you're just taking a situation where you don't know what these things are that are causing you to be in that pullback mode, you're just going to throw some stem cells in there. yeah, they're going to help transiently, but you're still, the house is still burning down, and you're trying to now do something. You're trying to rebuild it as it's burning down. So here's the thing. We have this set of things, and so chronically we are shrinking as we're on the wrong side of this balance. The supply is being exceeded by the demand. Well, you'll keep downsizing until you can meet the demand. So that's why you need to remove those insults. And as you indicated, there are several common ones. So let's start with, what are the common things for people to be insulted by as we are living? Well, we found subtypes of Alzheimer's that tell you, is yours mostly inflammatory, atrophic, glycotoxic, etc.
And
So
we can
again,
see markers for that in the blood?
yes, you can see markers for those in the blood. So you can say, this person is mostly an inflammatory Alzheimer patient or inflammatory pre-Alzheimer's. And again, pre-diabetes, we recognize more and more pre-Alzheimer's incredibly important if we're going to make Alzheimer's a rare condition, which is exactly what it should be. So anything that's inflammatory. So we should know how we're doing with our oral microbiome. Do you have a lot of pathogens? Do you have poor dentition? You are at increased risk for cognitive decline if you do. And then, do you have leaky gut? So again, leaky gut is something that I wasn't taught about in medical school, but turns out to be quite common for many of us. And when you have that, it will contribute to systemic inflammation and therefore increase your risk for cognitive decline. So these are all parts of type 1 or inflammatory cognitive decline.
So let's talk about leaky gut. So if it's not taught in medical school, then I got to educate myself about leaky gut. If that's going to lead me to being a patient or leading me down the wrong road to dementia and to Alzheimer's, then I need to know what leaky gut is. There are foods that to help a leaky gut. And you've heard these foods before, but I'm going to repeat them again. Broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, carrots, kale, spinach. You see the pictures, fruits, the nuts and the seeds, the fermented foods, the kimchi, the sauerkraut, the tempeh. Yes, protein, fish, lean cuts of meat, and even grass-fed. Let me add that to it. Eggs, avocados, avocado oil, virgin olive oil, bone broth, teas, coconut milk, nut milk, kombucha, lactose-free dairy products and dairy, the oats, the dairy alternatives, oats, corn, rice, quinoa, buckwheat, okay? Foods to help a leaky gut.
And then type 2 is atrophic. And so that's on the supply side where you have reductions. And a typical thing, people will have poor thyroid hormone or reduced testosterone or reduced estradiol or reduced vitamin D or increased homocysteine, on and on. So there's a whole set of things, again, required to make your brain function well. And I think everybody has that feeling. I have a day where you get up and, wow, I'm really on today, things are going great. And on the other hand, everyone's had days where, like, wait a minute, things are just not right today. So that's another big one there. And then glycotoxic. So one of the most common contributors in the United States to cognitive decline is insulin resistance. There are about 80 million Americans who have insulin resistance. Many of them go on to have type 2 diabetes, but you don't have to have type 2 diabetes. Insulin is not only the thing that deals with glucose, of course, it's an energy-related hormone, but it's also quite an important growth factor for brain cells. And so when we used to grow brain cells in a dish all the time, we would always have to include insulin in their medium to keep them alive and to keep them interacting. Unfortunately, what happens to us is we are exposed to high carb diets, low fiber diets, high glycemic loads, and so we put out all this insulin for years, and therefore we end up developing. You can actually follow the biochemistry of it. IRS1, the signaling molecule downstream from the insulin receptor, has specific phosphorylation sites, multiple. When it is on signaling, the tyrosine phosphorylation is high and the serine threonine phosphorylation is low. When you have insulin resistance, that changes. You have specific sites that are phosphorylated on serines and threonines, which is literally saying to you, we're turning down the volume here. And so this is now not giving its appropriate signaling. You have insulin resistance, and you can check. Everyone should know their HOMA-IR. This is a simple calculation to tell you whether you have insulin resistance. If you do, you are at increased risk for cognitive decline, and you're probably not as sharp as you should be. So that's what we call type 1.5, because it's both an atrophic one and an inflammatory one. Of course, the glycation of your proteins, everyone's familiar with hemoglobin A1C, which is what we measure for glycation of these proteins. But there are hundreds of proteins that are non-enzymatically glycated when you have high glucose levels. So that's
Now,
another.
I've heard Alzheimer's referred to as type 3 diabetes.
Right.
But researching you, that seems like even that, while probably a pretty big breakthrough compared to people talking just about amyloid plaques, still feels like a simplification.
Listen, guys, he talked about insulin, and I got to stop in there because over 80 million people, Americans, are insulin resistant because of the high carb diets, because of the low fiber diets, because of the high glycemic loads. See, if you never do any of the tests that he's going to tell you that you should have these tests done, if you never do any of these tests, if you just stop, if you just tell people to lessen these three areas, high carbs, you see the pictures, low fiber, and things that have high glycemic. We talked about the glycemic charts on last session.
Identifying what causes Alzheimer's, cognitive decline, figuring out how to begin to reverse that also tells us how to stay optimal, or even, a little beyond to get to my obsession. What does that protocol look like? What are we eating? What are we doing? Are we in the sauna? Are we exercising? Are we getting sunlight? Like, what are the things people can do?
Great point. So I have a book coming out actually in August, which is called The First Survivors of Alzheimer's. And fantastic, 7 wonderful stories from 7 people who actually developed Alzheimer's. We're told you're going to die, you got Alzheimer's. All of whom
How deep into Alzheimer's were these people?
Most of them had relatively early stage. We have had some people very late stage who have improved, but what happens is they tend to improve, but they don't get all the way back to normal. So that's one of the things we're working on right now. How do we take someone with late stage Alzheimer's and get them all the way back to normal? What we can do is we can get them improved somewhat. For people with early stage or especially pre-Alzheimer's, we see tremendous improvements. We see people go from MoCA scores of 19, which is very impaired. It goes from 0 to 30. MoCA is Montreal Cognitive Assessment. So it's a kind of standard test that's used. And everyone should be scoring in the 28 to 30. 30 is a perfect score. And so we had people down in 19, which is Alzheimer's disease, who came back to 30. So very, very striking. And so, yeah, very enthusiastic about that. But you brought up a good point. In this book, we have a chapter specifically on enhancing normal cognition. So what are all the things that you can do to get best outcomes? And yes, there's a whole program very much like what we're using to bring people from suboptimal cognition to optimal cognition. You can start with normal and improve on your cognition. And yes, it has to do with a whole set of things. You're right, detox is part of it. We all have some degree of exposure to toxicity by the air we're breathing, by the water we're drinking, by the food we're eating. Just if you're eating mercury-filled seafood, if you're not eating grass-fed beef, if you've got a high-carb diet, if you're eating simple carbs, all of these things are contributing to a lesser than optimal outcome.
Now, guys, when I heard him say detoxing, I got excited. Because you know what a detox is. A detox is your opportunity to give your body a break and allow your own self-cleansing and your self-healing process to kick into gear. We have a company that we are all focused on detoxing. Everybody should detox. Detoxing at least once or twice a year, minimum. The 4-day bitters detox, a 7-day refresh detox, a 21-day reset detox. And if you don't know about it, you need to ask somebody. Okay, because detoxing is what's needed in every person's life. You heard him say it. I got excited when he said that.
So you're absolutely right. Just getting in that sauna, getting the sweat going, and then using a non-toxic soap like Castile to get that.
I want to go slow through this. This is something that I've heard you say a lot, and I've never heard of these soaps. So is Castile a brand?
No, it's a type of soap. And the whole idea of this is that they are they help you to get rid of the toxins without adding more toxin. You don't want a lot of fragrance.
Meaning the sauna. The soap's not helping you get rid of toxins, I would assume.
Well, no, what happens is the sauna is driving them out.
Okay.
So
just through sweat.
Right. And if you don't then wash them away, they will slowly reabsorb. So you think about it, you want to get rid of toxins by imbibing less, obviously, less exposure, less of the eating, less of the breathing, less of the drink, all that stuff. And by the way, all of us who were in the California fires, had a setback because of that. That's an issue. And we've had patients who were in, for example, the World Trade Center cloud. If you look at everyone in the World Trade Center cloud, just by 2015, 13% of them already had cognitive decline. These are people, relatively young, scary as hell. It really is. This being in that Trade Center cloud increased your risk not only for what we've heard about, lung disease and cancers, but also for cognitive decline.
Okay, so just by way of example, I want to keep going slow so that I make sure people can really take this into their lives. Okay, so I'm in the World Trade Center. The problem is, forgetting cancer for a second and lung disease, which are maybe more obvious, but I'm taking something in, it's getting into my bloodstream, it's crossing the blood-brain barrier, and some mechanism is happening in my brain. I'm guessing the amyloid plaques are actually glomming on to these toxic particles that have made their way into my brain. My brain goes into survival mode, so I'm not in growth and repair. I'm just trying to survive. I'm shrinking. So, okay, to try to minimize it, I can HEPA filter the life out of my space.
Yep.
Number two, I've taken in some toxins. I recognize that. So now I'm doing something to make me sweat. Is a sauna and exercise identical, or does a sauna have certain benefits that exercise doesn't, or vice versa?
They both have their own benefits, but they both do have sweating as one of their benefits. Yes, with exercise, you're also improving blood flow to your brain. The sauna doesn't do that as much. On the other hand, sauna is dropping your blood pressure, actually kind of relaxing the arterial stiffness for a period of time. So some people, unfortunately, will pass out in saunas, as you know, so be careful about that. But yes, you also want to increase your glutathione. You also want to
supplementing or diet?
There are a couple ways to go. And for many of these things, you can do it with diet. So as an example, you want to take some sulforaphane. Very helpful. And you can get this with broccoli sprouts, as an example.
And is this for everybody, or only if we're in a big environmental toxin moment?
Yeah, so that's exactly the point. We are all living in a toxic world. That's the problem. Human beings are complicated organisms, and we are all exposed to some degree of toxicity. And so we realize that detoxification is not just for sick people. It's also for people who want to be healthier, who want to enjoy a better future with a lower risk of cognitive decline, a lower risk of cancer, a lower risk of chronic illness. I think this is something that, we've thought about medicine as we do fine and then we get sick. And then we take a pill and we're going to be better again. But that's not the way it works. And then when I was on the National Aging Council, there was an epidemiologist who did a very interesting study looking at when on average do U.S. citizens develop their first chronic illness. And the answer was in our 40s. When do citizens of the UK develop their first chronic illness? In their 50s. So we're almost 10 years worse than the UK. We don't think of the UK as being a tremendously healthy group, but they are healthier than United States citizens on average. Again, so we've got that combination of diet, poor exercise, high stress, poor sleep, and without a lot of brain training. That is a recipe. I wrote in the first book, The End of Alzheimer's, a chapter specifically on how to give yourself Alzheimer's. You want to give yourself Alzheimer's, I can help you do that. It's actually pretty easy. You do all these things, the opposite of what we're recommending. And even though you won't have Alzheimer's on day one, you'll have the biochemistry that leads to it down the road. So you can impact yourself a lot by looking at that, that whole set of things.
All right, let me give myself Alzheimer's real quick and tell me if I got it right or if I'm missing anything. I'm going to totally disrupt my sleep.
Yep.
I'm going to avoid sunlight, so no vitamin D.
Right.
I'm going to take in as much breathable toxin as humanly possible. I'm definitely going to be doing things like smoking or sitting in traffic. I am going to do pro-inflammatory stuff. So I'm going to be lots of carbohydrates, very low fat. I'm going to eat a lot of big seafood, so things that live for a long time, and eat a lot of smaller fish. I'm trying to think what the other six there.
Well, no,
I've gotten several of them.
yeah, cheeseburgers, fries, and a Coke. So lots of sugar, lots of saturated fat, and no fiber. That is what we call the Bermuda triad. So it's kind of like the Bermuda triangle. This is the Bermuda triangle. And so it's giving you this combination. So you want to have a leaky gut. You want to have a very high stressful job. And the bottom line for the chapter was you want to do what so many of us are doing all the time. That is why 15% of us are dying of Alzheimer's disease, because we live in a society and live in such a way and eat in such a way and sleep in such a way and have stress in such a way that we are doing all the things that are pro-Alzheimer's. By the way, before we ever get Alzheimer's, many of us will avoid Alzheimer's, but we're still going to have suboptimal cognition. So we're not going to do it. And, you know, many of us face that. Oh my God, it's the afternoon. I can barely keep my eyes open. I can barely focus. I can barely get my job done. I can't work fast enough. Those sorts of things. Those are all critical.
Critical. Can you talk about that Castile soap? I had never heard about Castile soap. That's a pure Castile soap. It's natural, non-toxic, biodegradable, made without any synthetic ingredients. So it's going to make me now look at the soaps that I've been using, right? Originally made in the Mediterranean before its popularity spread across Europe, and it's a soap that has historically been used in a variety of ways. We understand about the saunas. Oh, I'm so glad about the saunas that we have and our exposure to, our diet, poor exercise. I need you guys to exercise. I need you to put some movement in. If you're not doing it, then you're saying, like the gentleman said, let me put myself in a position where I'm headed towards Alzheimer's or dementia, right? And you do all the things that are contrary to what we're talking about. You make sure that you don't sleep good.
Okay, so I want to stay on toxicity for a second. Is fiber tied to toxicity, or does that have a...
Absolutely. So how do you get rid of these toxins? So what's happening is you have a dynamic balance. You're exposed to toxins all the time, and you are metabolizing them, inactivating them, excreting them all the time. So what's happening, if you're on the wrong side of that balance, you have a bad future. If you're on the right side, you're just getting better all the time. So as you said, you want to absolutely reduce your exposure. Find out what your home ERMI score is. That's from the EPA. If it's high, get rid of, remediate and get rid of that exposure. Avoid the California fires. Avoid being on the 405, at rush hour and that sort of thing. As you mentioned, HEPA filters, very important. I think, everybody should think about HEPA filters in their home. Cleaner air, no question, very, very good. And then the appropriate urination. So yeah, filtered water. So many of us are exposed to really low quality water. So that's a huge issue. And appropriate urination every day, very, very helpful.
So I put this on here because some of you may decide you want to do this particular test in your home, knowing what kind of mold may be in your home. We only think about mold when we think about, like I live in Texas where we've had floods, but there are these websites where you can actually order this, what he called ERMI, Environmental Relative Moldness Index, to make sure there is no what level of mold. It's a little pricey, $240, but I just wanted to put it on there so you can begin to just do your own research to find out where you might be able to get this, or even have someone come in and do the test. He said the help of filters. And of course, he said filtered water, urination. Sometimes we have it on our systems. Sometimes we buy better quality water so that we can not be dependent on whatever toxins may be in the water that we're drinking in our area.
High fiber diets. You're literally moving out these things. So you've got a couple of ways to do it, right? And then you're also sweating them out. And it's different toxins that are being removed by these different mechanisms. And then, of course, you're also breathing them out. So you want to optimize those things. And then in your blood flow, you want to have high glutathione levels, high vitamin C levels. So you want to have the appropriate detoxicants to bind these things up. Now, you mentioned metals. So many of us are exposed to heavy metals. And Dr. Joe Pizzorno has made a wonderful career as a toxicologically oriented physician at looking at how many of us are exposed to too much mercury, too much lead, too much arsenic, too much on the persistent organic pollutants, and we don't realize it. As he points out, it's one of the major players in this increase in type 2 diabetes that has affected so many people in the United States. Yes, part of it is obesity, part of it is poor diet, but part of it also is exposure to arsenic, as it turns out. So
where are we taking arsenic in?
Yeah, you're taking arsenic in from several sources. You get it from groundwater. That's one of the most important things. So you can look up, what is the water in my area in terms of arsenic? Where does it stand? There's certain areas of Utah, for example, very high in arsenic in groundwater. And then interestingly, a lot of chicken. So for people who eat a ton of non-organic chicken, beware, check your arsenic level. Rice, another big one. For people who eat a ton of rice, check to see what your arsenic level is, because again, it's something you can detox from. And so you don't want to be keeping that stuff around. It can be damaged. It also increases your risk for cancer, by the way. And as a group, these things all increase your risk for cognitive decline. So again, you can do. So yes, you want to give yourself Alzheimer's, toxicity is part of it. And I can help you so that you can give yourself Alzheimer's fairly quickly.
It's very kind. I'm glad that you can also do the reverse and help me unwind some of this stuff.
And that's what we're doing. We're going to unwind this stuff. We're going to end this. We're going to get this and understand that high fiber diet he talked about. That's what we need. High glutathione. See, increasing your glutathione provides health benefits. That includes reducing the oxidative stress. So when you're looking at these pictures, all these pictures are related to the terminologies that he's talking about. High vitamin C levels. All of these various foods raise up your glutathione. You want it to be raised up. You want to have more fiber in your diet. You want more vitamin D in your diet. You want to have not exposure to the heavy metals because we're getting sometimes too much mercury, lead, and arsenic. Even when we think about eating fish, we got people that are pescatarians, and I've done their bioscan, and their bioscan will be off, and they say, but all I eat is fish. Well, the question is, what kind of fish are you eating? See, you can have too much mercury by eating the fishes that are on the high side. You see what's over there: bluefish, grouper, mackerel, martin, sea bass, shark, swordfish. That's the ones, like he said, they live a long time. And you notice tuna is over there, right? But then when you look at what's on the low side, so we've got a large selection of things that we can have in our lives and still live a nice, healthy life and enjoy yourself. Then he talked about lead. Where you can find lead: tap water, packaged spices, the fruit juices sometimes, baby food. Oh my God, we're feeding the kids lead. Look at that. Dark chocolate. So none of this, I'm going to say it again, is not what you do some of the time. It's what you do most of the time on a regular basis. And then the arsenic that he mentioned. See, arsenic can be in so many different areas. And sometimes when you do the research, they'll say, well, it's not enough to kill you. Right. But it is enough to kill you when you do it every day throughout your entire life. And that's why it's leading us to disease.
If you have ongoing inflammation, what your body is saying to you is, hey, Tom, you got an insult from these various organisms. So the last thing you want to do is eat up and get rid of your amyloid, because your amyloid has an antimicrobial effect. It is part of your innate immune system, by the way. So we want to leave that amyloid there so that it can continue to kill the bugs. So if you want to get rid of your amyloid and flush it out, you want to start by having a pristine system in which there isn't systemic inflammation, because then your body's, because you're working against yourself. As long as you're saying, hey, I'm inflamed, I've got these various things from my oral microbiome or sinusitis or what have you in my brain, you're not going to get rid of amyloid. You're going to make more because you're trying to fight those things. So the first thing to do is shut off the reason for making it, the insults. Second thing to do is to bind it up. And by the way, curcumin binds it up very nicely. So this is why, again, many people will actually shave a little turmeric on their food. People from India do this for years and years, and it keeps that amyloid low. It helps to remove it. It binds it and helps to remove it. Now, again, you don't want to remove it if you've got systemic inflammation going on. But if you have an anti-inflammatory state, you can slowly remove it. Guess how else you remove it? Getting a good night's sleep. Very good to help remove it. And again, other things like excellent exercise. You're getting that blood flow. You're essentially you're doing more exchange than you would otherwise be doing, supporting it with appropriate oxygenation.
Are you hearing the same things over and over again? Yeah. He talked about amyloid plaque. I didn't know what amyloid plaque was. That's the plaque from protein pieces that clump together. And when I heard that word clump together, I thought about the agglutination that we are hearing about when we're eating according to our blood type or when we're not eating according to our blood type. Curcumin, which comes from turmeric, right? So putting it on our food, oxygenation, we want to make sure the blood flow. Some of these things we're able to find out when we do our bioscan technology, that we're able to show people where they are in these areas so that we can have better oxygenation taking place. And if there's plaque buildup in the arteries and the oxygen's not flowing through. I'm almost done. I got to hearing this guy and I couldn't stop until I heard everything he had to say.
Okay, so let's go real deep on diet here. So I don't know what percentage of the issue you would prescribe to diet, but my sort of knee-jerk reaction, if somebody's like, my flight was delayed, I'm like, it's your diet. Like, to me, everything comes back. I know I'm oversimplifying, but so much comes back to diet. So you said something that I found really interesting, which was, think of me, so I go hard on meat. Grass-fed, but still, I like my meat. And you said to treat meat like a condiment. So I found that very interesting. So what should my diet be? And assume I'm willing to do whatever you tell me is optimal.
Yeah. And again, you are relatively young. That's great. So when you're young, great. Have a high protein diet. No problem. You want to get clean protein, of course. So you want to put things in that are cleaner, that don't have all the pesticides, don't have all the hormones, don't have all the heavy stress. Many of these animals dying from bacterial infections. So you got that now. So that you want to avoid that. So you already mentioned you're doing, you're eating things that are grass-fed beef. Fantastic. The key here is you want to stay away from high, simple carb diets. That is bad for everybody. And again, it's an important part of being able to give yourself Alzheimer's optimally. If you really want to give yourself Alzheimer's, have plenty of simple carbs. So what you want to have is a high good fats, polyunsaturates and monounsaturates, so olive oil, so eating avocados, eating any sorts of oils, even some small amount of saturated fats, coconut oil, not even so bad. You don't want to have a ton of linoleic acid. Be careful about the omega-6s. You want to, for most of us, the average American diet has about 15 to 1 omega-6 to omega-3. It's unbelievable. So we're basically saying, let's give ourselves as much inflammation as we can and as little anti-inflammatory. If we can get it closer to 1 to 1, 2 to 1, 3 to 1, even 4 to 1, that's
where are the big omega-6s coming in? So grain-fed beef would have a ton of omega-6.
Yeah, you're getting it you're basically getting it from seed oils, things like that. So you want to be careful about these seed oils that can have,
also known as vegetable oil.
Yeah, vegetable oil, stuff like that. Palm oil, things like that. Stick with the avocado oil and that sort of thing, and the extra virgin olive oil on the positive side. And to be fair, you do get a lot of omega-6s from nuts. So you want to have some nuts because they do give you good oils, but you don't want to be going crazy on the nuts because they can give you too much on the inflammatory side.
Do I need raw nuts? Can I have roasted, salted? Where are we at?
Raw and minimally roasted. Don't roast them to death because you're damaging the oils then, and you can oxidize the oils. Remember when saturated fats are hard to oxidize because they don't have double bonds. But the unsaturated fats have those double bonds that make them quite susceptible to oxidation. They can go rancid. That's the idea. And so be careful of rancidity.
So when I was listening to that, in case you're listening and watching this and you're saying, well, what are simple carbs? Well, you haven't gotten it yet. So I'm going to make sure you get it. There's a picture, right? That's the fast foods. That's the bread, the cookies, the Cokes, the sodas, the candies, the cereals. All of those are simple carbs. Simple carbs, okay? The healthy fats, we want to stay with the olive, not the vegetable fats. And then the omega-6. He said what? 1 to 1, 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1. Yeah, I did a test There's a company that does these kind of tests. It takes 21 days to get this test. But now we are able to actually give people the test within 2 minutes and give you the results right then to know where you are with your omega-3 and omega-6. He said it. Most of us, the ratio is 15 to 1, 21 to 1, 25 to 1, and it's supposed to be 1 to 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 to 1. We're getting too much omega-6. Every time you drive through the fast food restaurant, you're getting omega-6 because they're frying it in vegetable oil, all right? Because he said it comes from seed oils. And then too many nuts. So some of us love our nuts, okay? We talk about eating nuts when you're just getting an appetite or you're getting a craving. Throw some nuts, some almonds or some pecans or some walnuts in your mouth. But then he talked about excessive amount, right? So we prevent nuts from going rancid. You do what? You store them in the freezer, keep a small jar in a pantry for easy access, or slowly refill from your freezer every 2 weeks or so. Keep those nuts in a well-labeled airtight container, shield them from light and heat. We're almost done.
Okay, so now let's talk about the meat in that. So I've heard you say plant rich. So I want to have what percentage, like if you were going to ballpark me calories, what percentage of my calories do I want from plants?
Yeah. So here's the thing. Let's work from the biochemistry side. Here's what, then we'll talk about if you want to end up with perfect brain function, here's what you need to do that. Okay. So for good brain function, you want to be able to have some ketosis. So you want to have a mildly ketotic diet. Do you check your ketones, and are you driving yourself into mild ketosis?
I checked my ketones so ferociously for so many years. Even though I don't check them now, I can feel it.
Right.
Explain
Yeah.
to me though, why do I want to be in ketosis at some periods? And you should probably tell people about your keto 12-3,
Yeah.
just so that they get sort of your overall philosophy. And then I promise, I mentioned seafood. We will come back to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, walk us through the why of ketosis.
Right. So the thing is that your brain functions, it's got to have energy. And you get two types. You can either metabolize glucose or you can metabolize ketones. That's what your mitochondria use in your brain. And good brain function is a lot about energetics, as we talked about before. And by the way, Alzheimer's is a lot about poor energetics, poor mitochondria, poor evaluation. So what happens is so many of us, we should be metabolically flexible. You should be able to go back and forth. You have some carbs, you metabolize that. The next meal you have a lot of fats, you metabolize ketones, which come from the metabolism of the fats, and you go back and forth. That's where you want to be. For so many of us, though, we're purely on the carbs. And so even beginning in your late 20s, if you're at risk, and if are ApoE4 positive, and let's digress for one moment to talk about ApoE. Do you know your ApoE status?
I don't, but after listening to you, I am desperate to get tested.
Yeah. So 3/4 of people in the country are ApoE4 negative, which means your lifetime risk for Alzheimer's about 9% or so. About 75 million Americans have one copy of ApoE4, so they got it from either their mother or their father, but not both. And their risk goes from 9% for their life to 30% for their life. And then 7 million Americans have two copies. They got one from their mother and one from their father, and they are well over 50% more likely that they will get Alzheimer's than that they will avoid it. Well, good. Now we can make sure that nobody gets it. Again, by doing the right things, by checking these things before you get it. Unfortunately, most people don't know. So when you have ApoE, then you have an increased risk for cognitive decline. You have an increased risk for inflammation. And so you want to know that in terms of what you're going to be doing optimally. And by the way, it's one of the key issues for seafood. So improving, one of the reasons to get your appropriate fats on board. And so those people are specifically should be staying away from a lot of saturated fats. So all we're trying to do is drive people, get you into ketosis. If you take someone who's ApoE4 positive as an example, by the late 20s, you can see a decreased glucose utilization in the temporal lobe and the parietal lobe. That's the signature of Alzheimer's in many years later, but you're beginning to see the first changes in the late 20s and early 30s. So again, why we suggest...
So I know enough about ApoE4 to ask maybe the right question. So ApoE4 you put in a historical context really amazing, that it actually would have been very beneficial to our long ago ancestors who were just coming down out of the trees. They needed a pro-inflammatory state to deal with punctures in their feet, infections, eating raw food, all that. I thought that was a brilliant take, that it's actually disappearing because of the changes in the lifestyle, but it actually served a purpose. That, I don't know, that made me feel better about it. But that the reason that I begin to get the decrease in uptake of insulin is because I'm in a pro-inflammatory state. Is that what's causing that?
Yes, because you have this beginning of loss of utilization, and it is related to insulin resistance, a pro-inflammatory state. You can bridge that gap, and some beautiful work from Dr. Stephen Cunnane showed that you can bridge that energy gap with ketones. So that's why we want to get you into a mildly ketotic state. And for anyone with cognitive decline, we definitely want to get you into a mildly ketotic state. And that means a low carb diet. Now, there's nothing wrong with appropriate meats, and especially, think about, fish, especially the smash fish, the little guys, salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, and herring. Those are the good guys. You don't want the high mercury guys because they can hurt you. And you want wild caught fish. Grass-fed beef, nothing wrong with that. If you want to be a vegetarian, fine. If you want to have grass-fed beef, no problem. And it'll help you obviously with avoiding sarcopenia as you get a little older, loss of muscle mass. So you can get protein, you can get your protein through meat, you can get it through vegetables and other things as well, beans, all sorts of other ways to get it. So this KetoFlex 12.3 is that you're getting into ketosis, you're having a high fiber diet, you're having fasting for a minimum of 12 hours. If you're ApoE4 positive, 14 to 16 hours is better. If you're ApoE4 negative, 12 to 14 is fine. You need that time overnight to get some autophagy, to get your lymphatic system, you're now cleaning things up, and to improve your ketosis. So all these things work together to give you the best synaptic maintenance and synaptogenesis. So that's why KetoFlex 12.3. And the 3 hours is before bed. So if you don't want to stop eating 5 minutes before you go to bed because your insulin will still be high. And by the way, have you checked your CGM yet? So continuous glucose monitoring, another. Quantified self is changing the world. So for, I think, all your viewers, there's so much you can do now that wasn't available 10 years ago, between Apple Watch and Oura Ring and Omron for blood pressure and ketone checks, things like Biosense. You can do breathalyzers now. You can check your sleep at night. You can check your microbiome. You can check your genome. I mean, it's incredible. So you really can fine tune yourself and improve your health and improve your long-term cognition with all the things that are currently available.
All of this makes so much sense because we're able to take care of self-care. He talked about a ketosis. It's a metabolic state that occurs when your body burns fat. He talked about not waiting till 5 minutes before you go to bed. He said 3 hours. He talked about fasting, and you have to guide yourself to the place where he was talking about 18 hours or 16 hours, but you start somewhere. This chart shows you as a beginner, you eat only when you're hungry and you skip a meal. Then athletes, they're more intense. They do a 16-8, 16 on, 16 off, 8 hours eating, or 20 and 4. You just guide yourself through that course. And then he talked about all of these things that meat is not the only place to get protein. So we want to get plant protein. That's why it's so good that we have something available to us to offer to people, that you can get the protein that you need that is plant-based. Now, we can guide ourselves through all of these or not do any of these. And then that determines whether we can end dementia or start it in our lives.
But if you just want to do it by quantified self, then I recommend that people get either an Apple Watch, an Oura Ring, something like this. And again, there are so many things you can do. You can look at your microbiome on your own. Literally send that in. You can look at Your blood pressure, check it easily. There's a thing called Omron, which will allow you to follow it with your Apple Toolkit. And we actually have an app now that looks at all these various things and helps you to follow them along. You can look at your oxygenation, as I mentioned earlier, with Apple Watch and things like that. And then you can also look at your vascular elasticity with something that's called iHeart. So you take that and look at your vascular elasticity, and then your heart rate variability, and you can see how you're doing for your age. And again, you'll notice when you're under a lot of stress, when things are tough, you're going to have a much lower heart rate variability. When you're doing well, and again, as a scientist, I never thought the idea of things like meditation. I thought these things were worthless. And I have to say, I can't ignore the data. The data show you that these things are actually helpful. Getting that heart rate variability up, getting that stress down, actually turns out to be surprisingly helpful. And interestingly, as we were developing drugs for Alzheimer's, one of the targets turns out to be CRF1. So it's just basically the thing that's causing you to release cortisol. Of course, cortisol releasing factor has receptors in your brain. And those receptors are, when they're binding, you're getting a pro-Alzheimer's effect. So again, you're affecting cognition by running up your cortisol levels. So no question, things like meditation and good sleep, getting your heart rate variability up, turn out all to be very helpful. And then I assume that you check your VO2 max as well?
I have never.
Okay, your Apple Watch has that, so you can see where your VO2 max is. Yours is probably very high, because if you're in good shape, it should be quite high. And of course, it's age related, but again, keeping yourself in good shape, that's another thing. It's basically telling you, are you able to metabolize the oxygen and get yourself appropriate blood flow? And so again, all these things are critical for giving yourself best outcomes and best cognition, by the way. And then I think it's helpful to check glutathione. Some people argue that that's one that most people are going to have a decent level of glutathione. But for people who have toxicity, you have to have some way to determine, do I have a lot of ongoing exposure to toxins? So I think it's a very helpful thing to do. Check your glutathione level, and also check to see if you've got toxins, if you've got heavy metals. That's an easy one to check. That's a blood test. Or you can do it as a urine test. Some people like to do it as a provoked urine test. That's fine. But one way or another, screening for those metals, see where you stand. And then organics. If you've got very high load of persistent organic pollutants, that's important to know. If you've got high exposure to benzene, toluene, and here's an example. We had a person come in a few years ago who was 47 years old with clear cognitive decline, and it turned out that what had happened is she had been exposed for years and years to paraffin candle burning, and these things give off high levels of benzene, toluene, even some mercury. And so she had extremely high levels, unfortunately, of those things from this constant exposure. So again, helpful to do that, and then look at your mycotoxins. And again, there's a separate test for those. There's a couple groups. Real Time does this, and also GPL both do these urinary mycotoxins. If you're low, hallelujah. Don't think about it for a few years. But if you're not realizing that you're exposed to these things, they can give you all sorts of problems, including cognitive decline, where you go in and the doctor says, I don't know why you've got this, your cognition's just not very good. Well, that's something that's important to look into. So all of these, very, very helpful.
So I started saying hallelujah because at this point, I'm thinking all of these things we can find out through our bioscan and our biofeedback technology. So in closing, dementia is not a natural part of aging. This is how I started. This is how I'm going to end. It is a set of symptoms that develop when the brain is damaged by disease, but we can end dementia.
Man, all of this has been extraordinarily helpful. I have really enjoyed not only our time together, but researching you, going through your book. Very, very hopeful the way that you're showing people that we really may be living through the last generation that gets Alzheimer's without understanding how to avoid it. And so that is extraordinary. And then being able to use this stuff for cognitive optimization is incredible. Where can people find out more about you so that they know when the book is coming out, which I believe is later in 2021? What's the best way?
Yeah, good point. So the next book, The First Survivors of Alzheimer's, coming out in August. Thanks for asking about that. And you can get more information at drbredesen.com. Or you can go to mycognoscopy.com, or you can go to Apollo Health. So we set up a software company that does software for looking at all these different variables. Because again, the future of medicine is for physicians to work with software engineers. So your generation is going to have much better cognition than my generation because we didn't know about this. And you don't have to worry about Alzheimer's. It really should be a rare disease, and I'm convinced it will be. By the time you get to my age, I think this will be a very rare condition.
That's what we want to close with. It's got to become a rare condition. We can make the change through the education, through the understanding of all the necessary things that we can do. We have it in the palm of our hands, what we can do to determine which direction that we go. Are you going to the right or are you going to the left? It's up to you, but we don't have to let the DNA, oh, it's in my family, everybody else in my family had it. No, the buck stops here.